Kenichi is a middle-aged guy, a total washout. He gets tossed into some other world with one trick up his sleeve, a cheat skill that hooks him up with an online shopping site. This story kicks off with a guy named Kenichi, who works himself into the ground until he lands in the hospital. Doctors tell him to chill for the sake of his heart, so he packs up and moves out to the wilderness for a peaceful life. Out there he grows some crops, hangs out with a few crows, and catches up on isekai anime while working on his writing. One day, while trying to order ingredients online, Kenichi suddenly vanishes and ends up in a strange new place. He stumbles across a corpse nearby and starts wondering if he's landed in some kind of fantasy world. With nothing to lose, he tries what he's seen in all those isekai shows. He calls for his status screen. To his shock, it works. The screen pops up confirming he's definitely in another world. But something's off. His health and magic points aren't listed. There are no skills either. The only thing showing up is something called Shangri-La. When he clicks on it, Kenichi realizes it's the same online shopping site he used back in his old life. The only other feature on the screen is an item box. Curious, he tests it out by storing some weeds. Turns out, it's simple to use and pulling stuff back out is just as easy. Right about then, Kenichi's stomach starts growling, so he tries to get food through Shangri-La. But the screen tells him he needs money, and he's got nothing. Being resourceful, Kenichi gets an idea. He figures out he can trade items from his item box for cash. Unfortunately, the weeds he picked up are worthless. Desperate for something valuable, his eyes land on the sword sticking out of the corpse. Kenichi trades the sword for almost 100,000 yen and finally gets himself some food. After eating, he buries the body and thanks it for saving his life. With some cash to spare, Kenichi buys a bike, a pair of boots, and a compass from Shangri-La. Using the compass, he sets off to find a settlement where he can earn more money. Taking a break, Kenichi cooks himself a meal with the supplies he ordered. That's when a light bulb goes off. He can use his online shop to buy stuff, sell it in this world for a profit, and stack up even more cash. Feeling good about his plan, Kenichi digs into his food, but his peace doesn't last. Out of nowhere, terrifying monsters start crawling out of the forest. Panicking, he pulls up Shangri-La, searching for weapons. The monsters are closing in fast, and the only weapon he finds is a bow. But there's one big problem: he has no idea how to use it. Kenichi settles on grabbing some fireworks, hoping they'll buy him a little time. They work, but not for long. Desperate, he snags a slingshot just in time, and it's a game changer. He manages to take out a few of the beasts and keeps firing, refusing to back down. Eventually, the wolves get spooked and take off, and Kenichi doesn't stick around either. Using the headlamp he bought, he navigates through the dark and puts as much distance as he can between himself and the danger. By the next day, Kenichi is relieved to spot a city off in the distance. On his way there, he crosses paths with a merchant named Fayu. Fayu offers him a ride to the city, and Kenichi gladly hops aboard. Fayu introduces Kenichi to another passenger, and they strike up a conversation. Kenichi mentions his plan to start doing business in the city, but Fayu notices he isn't carrying any gear. That's when it clicks: Kenichi must have an item box. The other passenger confirms it by pulling out an instrument from her own item box. She starts singing a song about their little journey and says this is where Kenichi's story truly begins. Once they reach the city, Kenichi thanks Fayu for the ride by handing him some pepper as a gift. Fayu is impressed, but also a little freaked out. He asks if Kenichi plans to sell this in the city. Fayu explains that selling pepper could get Kenichi in serious trouble. There's a spice syndicate in the city called Bacopa, and they've got a stranglehold on the spice trade. Even so, Fayu offers to pay for the pepper. Kenichi says it was a gift, but Fayu, being a proud merchant, insists on paying. This becomes Kenichi's first official sale. After Fayu leaves, Kenichi does some quick math and is blown away by how valuable pepper is here. That night, Kenichi heads to a restaurant that doubles as an inn. The receptionist greets him, and he pays 1 silver for a room. When she asks him to sign his name, Kenichi freezes, doesn't know how to write in this world's language. The receptionist notices his strange clothes and asks what his deal is. Kenichi explains it's related to his business. She tells him the Merchants Guild won't register anyone who can't read, write, or do math. Kenichi quickly clears up that he's no fool. He just doesn't know the local writing system. To test him, she gives him a quick math problem, and he nails it easily. She's impressed but points out that reading and writing are still an issue. She helps him out by teaching him how to write his name. Afterward, she introduces herself as Azalea. Kenichi asks if she'd be willing to teach him how to read and write in this country's language. Kenichi sweetens the deal by offering Azalea some candy from another country. As soon as she tastes it, she's hooked. The candy is ridiculously good, and Azalea feels like royalty just eating it. She even jokes that nobles would snatch it away if they knew about it. Her loving the candy is cool and all, but Kenichi nudges her to start teaching him already. After a while, Kenichi realizes the language isn't too far off from what he knew back in his old world. Azalea's impressed by how fast he's picking it up and tells him she's sure he'll make an amazing merchant. She's so confident in his future success that she jokes about becoming his mistress one day. Kenichi, being quite a bit older, tells her she should forget about that idea. Of course, he only makes things awkward when he sketches a portrait of her. Azalea once again is blown away by his skills. Between the candy and the drawing, she feels pretty special and decides she has to pay him back somehow. The next morning, Kenichi heads to the Merchants Guild to handle the paperwork. The registration fee is 1 silver, but his funds are running low. He's down to 116,000 yen. But luckily they let him pay in installments and issue his guild ID. Outside, Kenichi wanders through the market, checking out prices to get a feel for the local economy. A plain plate goes for a small square silver, roughly 5,000 yen. 2 sheets of slightly brown paper cost 1 copper, about 1,000 yen. He spots some knives and notes their price too. Then he picks up a mixed bag of strange-looking fruit from a vendor with a quirky sales pitch. The fruit names pop up in his item box, but they don't make much sense to him. Later, Azalea sees the fruit and lights up. Heard of them before and absolutely loves them. Back in his room, Kenichi tries to figure out what his big goal should be, but ends up passing out before he gets anywhere. The next day, he uses some supplies he bought, including a hammer, to build himself a stand. Azalea is amazed by the clothespins he's using, complains about the ones she uses always breaking, but his are way sturdier. She tells him they could be valuable, which catches Kenichi off guard. A little later, Kenichi surprises a sweet old lady by summoning his stand right next to hers. Once everything's set up, the Lady Anama ends up buying 5 clothespins for 1 copper, welcomes Kenichi to the area and sticks around to chat. As hours pass, Anama points out how quickly his clothespins are selling. Thanks to Kenichi's stand, her sales pick up too, and she hopes he never leaves. Kenichi's happy the clothespins are raking in money, but he's no fool, knows it's only a matter of time before others start copying his idea and selling their own versions. Out of nowhere, some kid shows up, and Kenichi instantly recognizes this guy as someone with serious status. The guy checks out one of Kenichi's knives. Kenichi demonstrates how easily it slices through stuff. The price is 2 silver. It's pricey, but the guy has never seen a blade this sharp and clean. The knife feels a little small for him, though, so he asks if Kenichi has anything bigger. Kenichi searches his item shop. Finding what he needs is tricky due to certain restrictions, but he pulls up a sword. The guy is amazed by how stunning it looks. The price is 1 gold coin. It's a lot of money, but the guy is hooked. Struggles to decide, while Kenichi wonders if the price might be too high. It's clear the guy is ready to spend big, so Kenichi stays confident. Before the sale finishes, a small cat person shows up sniffing around the stand. Other cat folks call her out for going overboard. It's Kenichi's first time seeing beast folk, so he apologizes for his reaction. One of the cats jumps onto his stand and points at the roof, saying he wants to buy it. Kenichi laughs, saying the roof isn't for sale, but then remembers he can always get more. The cat person decides to buy 3 roofs, so Kenichi offers a discount, shaving off 1 copper from the total. The cats don't have copper coins or seem to understand math. Kenichi quickly does the calculations for them. They seem skeptical, but the blonde guy steps in backing Kenichi's math. The cats finally agree to the deal. With that done, the blonde guy says he's ready to buy the sword. That night, Kenichi uses his earnings to pay for 5 nights at the inn. Meanwhile, in a noble's mansion, a lady admires the clothespins her maid bought. She's amazed by their quality and plans to sell them through her company. Determined to take advantage of the opportunity, she heads off to find her father. Back at the inn, Kenichi sets up for a bath using a small tub he bought. While browsing Shangri-La, he spots something called a drum bath and considers filling it with water and heating it over a fire. After all his shopping, Kenichi starts questioning how this online shop even works. The screen's light doesn't brighten his surroundings. He has no idea how the deliveries even reach him. A thought creeps in, it might demand something in return, maybe even his soul. The idea feels too heavy, so Kenichi decides to stop thinking about it. Elsewhere, a girl attacks a pigeon to get some food. She freezes when someone calls out to her, silently pleading for whoever it is to move along without noticing her. The next day, while Kenichi is setting up his shop, he decides to freshen up his inventory a bit. He puts out some jewelry for sale, not expensive gems or anything, but they're pretty enough to turn a profit. While he's organizing, Margaret, the maid from yesterday, shows up. She says she's back to buy more clothespins. Kenichi asks how many she wants, and she hits him with a shocker 100. He's surprised but quickly finalizes the sale since she's got the money ready. As Kenichi packs up her order, Margaret notices the jewelry he set out and asks if they're real diamonds. He explains they're just polished glass, but they look nice enough to catch attention. Margaret seems impressed and asks him to hold one for her so she can buy it later. The rest of the day goes smoothly, with business as usual. Just as Kenichi's about to close shop, the beast folk from yesterday show up again. Their serious expressions make him nervous, thinking they might be here to cause trouble. Before he can say anything, the cat girl Miley gets right up in his face, sniffing around. She confidently tells the others she smells spices coming from him. The beast folk light up with excitement, asking Kenichi to sell them some of his spices. He hesitates, remembering what he heard about the spice syndicate and how dangerous it might be if they catch him selling. Not wanting to risk it, he explains that he can't sell them any. The beast folk keep pleading, but locals nearby step in, telling them they can't expect a newcomer like Kenichi to put his business in jeopardy for them. The beast folk back off, seeming to understand. Kenichi, feeling bad for them, comes up with an idea. He figures sharing a meal with them wouldn't technically break any rules, so he invites them to join him for dinner, but they'll need to meet him in the woods to avoid attracting attention. The beast folk are thrilled and agree. Later that night, they meet Kenichi and Anama on the outskirts of town, ready to cook up a feast. Kenichi starts prepping the meal, and Anama offers to help. He asks her to chop some veggies, but when Anama gets a look at the produce, she's stunned by how vibrant and juicy they are. Kenichi explains they're imported from another country and guarantees they taste amazing. While Kenichi and Anama handle the veggies, Miley and the other beast folk head to the river to catch some fish. It doesn't take long before they manage to reel in a solid haul. With all the ingredients ready, Kenichi starts prepping the fish, seasoning it with spices before tossing everything into a pot to cook. After a while, the meal is ready and the beast folk can't get enough of it. They've never tasted anything this good before and thank Kenichi repeatedly for the feast. But as they eat, the good food starts making them crave some alcohol. Anama tells them to calm down, reminding them that booze is expensive. Kenichi doesn't see the harm in letting them have a little, so he pulls out a bottle, pours a few glasses and hands them out. He makes them promise, though they can't tell anyone about the meal he made for them. Anama warns Kenichi that he's being too generous, but he shrugs it off. He figures the beast folk deserve to enjoy themselves, especially since they seem like decent people. That night, they eat, drink, and even bathe together before eventually crashing under the stars. Miley seems to be warming up to Kenichi, so she decides to sneak into his bed. The next morning, Kenichi gets back to the inn. Azalea doesn't look happy and lets him know she's upset he stayed out all night. Kenichi tries to explain he was just hanging out with some beast folk outside town, but Azalea spots Cat Lady fur on his jacket and jumps to conclusions. She accuses him of doing a lot more than just hanging out, and she's mad he picked a cat lady over her. Later, as Kenichi is setting up his shop for the day, Margaret shows up with a stunning woman named Primula. Kenichi is briefly distracted by Primula's beauty, but quickly snaps out of it when he sees Margaret standing behind her. He realizes they're here for the necklace Margaret asked about the day before. He pulls out the necklace, and Margaret pays for it before giving it to Primula. As Primula examines it, she's impressed by the craftsmanship, can't believe it's not made of real diamonds. Primula asks if Kenichi has more necklaces like this, so he grabs a bunch from his item box and shows them to her. Primula is blown away, not just by the quality of his goods, but also by the fact that he has an item box. She then makes a request, introduces herself as the daughter of the owner of the Mallow Trading Company, and tells Kenichi she'd like him to meet her father. If he's willing to come with her, she'll make the introduction. Kenichi likes the idea of meeting the owner of a big trading company, but he's a little nervous about getting involved with someone so influential. Trouble always seems to follow when big players are involved. Anama reassures him, saying Primula's father is well known around town for being fair and trustworthy, so she tells Kenichi he doesn't need to worry about dealing with him. Hearing that, Kenichi decides to go along. Primula invites him to join her in her carriage so they can head to her father's place. On the way, Primula shows Kenichi some clothespin replicas her craftsman made. While they got the wooden part right, the metal clamp is way off. She admits it was too complicated for them to figure out. Kenichi isn't surprised, doesn't even know how the springs are made himself, just that it's a tricky process. When they arrive at Primula's home, Kenichi is blown away by how massive the house is. Primula laughs and tells him it's actually small compared to the mansions nobles around here live in. They head inside, and Primula introduces Kenichi to her father Mallow. The two exchange greetings, and Mallow invites Kenichi to sit down so they can talk business. Once Kenichi is settled, he shows Mallow some of the jewelry he brought. Mallow is just as impressed as Primula was. Then Primula mentions that Kenichi has an item box, which catches Mallow's attention. Mallow reveals that he also has an item box, and it's one of the reasons he was able to build his trading company into what it is today. He points out that if Kenichi uses his item box wisely, he could go far. For now, though, Kenichi's just using it to store supplies. Mallow gets straight to the point, saying he wants Kenichi to become an official supplier for the Mallow Trading Company. Kenichi had a feeling something like this was coming and figures Mallow is looking to maximize profits by locking in an exclusive deal. But if that's the goal, Kenichi asks why Mallow didn't just keep buying from his shop at low prices and resell the items for more later. Mallow admits he could have done that, but it's a shady move, and he respects Kenichi enough to avoid that kind of tactic. Plus, if Kenichi found out, he wouldn't be too happy about it. Mallow adds that having this direct conversation gives him an advantage over his competitors, who would probably try to approach Kenichi sooner or later. With that out of the way, Mallow proposes starting their partnership negotiations, offers to pay Kenichi 50% of the retail price for his goods. Kenichi could have played hardball for a better deal, but honestly, he's already stacking major coins from his online store, so he goes along with Mallow's offer without a fuss. They lock it down with a solid handshake, making it official. That first shipment of goods Kenichi sends off brings in over 1 million yen worth of coins, and he's feeling pretty good about how things are shaping up. Then, things take a turn when Primula lays eyes on the stash of gorgeous jewels Kenichi's been holding. She's instantly hooked, absolutely loving what she sees. She hits her dad Mallow with a quick plea to let her buy them straight off Kenichi. Mallow's cool with it, so Primula offers 10 gold coins, that's a whopping 2 million yen, to snag the jewels for herself. For Kenichi, this is a major win, the first time he's seen his bank balance hit 8 figures since landing in this world, and it's starting to feel like he's really found his groove. With cash piling up, Kenichi figures it's time to start setting up that peaceful life he's been dreaming about. So he picks out a house from his online store and heads outside the city walls, making his way into the forest to scout out the perfect spot. Before heading out, he fills Azalea in on his plan, so she doesn't freak out or worry too much. She still finds it weird that Kenichi wants to live out in the dangerous forest instead of staying safe in the city. Once he settles on a solid location, Kenichi gets down to business. First things first, he grabs a weed whacker and starts clearing the area. He quickly realizes fuel costs are ridiculously high even in this world, but he doesn't let it slow him down. He powers through, cutting a clear path into the forest. Next up, he's got to handle the trees. He pulls out a chainsaw and starts chopping them down one by one. After hours of hard work, he's got a pile of trees ready to go. But there's a problem: the logs are way too long to fit in his item box. Not one to back down from a challenge, Kenichi cranks up the chainsaw again and starts breaking the logs into smaller, manageable pieces. Finally, they fit into his item box, and he's one step closer to getting the job done. With most of the trees cleared, only the stumps are left. But that's a whole different beast. The sun's already setting, so Kenichi decides to call it a day and come back tomorrow to wrap things up. The next day, Kenichi's back at it, ready to tackle the stumps. So he starts digging around one, but quickly realizes this is way too much work for a middle-aged guy like him. He's not about to wreck his back over this, so he makes the smart move and buys himself a backhoe to handle the heavy lifting. When Kenichi finally sees the backhoe, it hits him he just dropped 1.2 million yen on heavy machinery because he didn't feel like doing manual labor. For a second he regrets it, but then he remembers how much easier it'll make his life and decides it's probably worth the investment. He fires up the engine, only to realize the thing runs on diesel, and his store doesn't sell diesel at all. Panic sets in as he thinks about how much money he just wasted if he can't even use it. After thinking it over, Kenichi figures he might be able to make his own diesel by mixing kerosene with some additives. But before he goes all in, he realizes that messing up the mix could ruin the engine. Playing it safe, he tests his homemade diesel on a generator first. So once he fills it up and turns it on, it works perfectly. Relieved, he knows the mixture will work for the backhoe, so he plans to head back to the forest the next day to finish the job. In the meantime, Kenichi decides he needs to deal with the bugs swarming the area. The next day, he visits a local magic shop to buy some bug-repellent magic stones. As soon as he walks in, the shop's wizard greets him and asks where he's from since he hasn't seen him around before. Kenichi explains he's a foreigner who recently opened a shop in town and is looking to buy bug-repellent stones. The wizard tells him the stones cost 3 silver coins, But that's way too expensive for Kenishi. He tries to haggle, offering 2 oranges in exchange for a lower price. The wizard, having never seen oranges before, assumes they're some kind of rare exotic fruit. Clearly impressed, he agrees to give Kenishi a discount. Later that day, Kenishi chats with Anama, who tells him the wizard is a super knowledgeable guy and someone good to have as a friend. She also mentions the complete opposite Shaga, a wanted criminal whose posters are plastered all over town. Shaga leads a notorious bandit group, and there's a huge bounty on his head. That same night, Shaga organizes a raid on a carriage full of slaves being transported. Whatever his plans are for them, it's definitely bad news. The next day, Kenishi heads back to the forest to finally put his backhoe to work. All his earlier doubts about the purchase are gone. The backhoe doesn't just make the job easier, it's actually fun to use. Now nothing's stopping him from chasing his dream of a quiet life in the woods. But after dropping so much cash on the backhoe, Kenishi's wallet is running dangerously low. Realizes he'll have to put his construction plans on hold for a while until he can make more money. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, it makes all the difference.